everyone. I'm actually very happy to follow 1inch because they gave a great contextualization of DeFi, so that means that I don't have to, and their amazing protocol. So let's jump in. My name is Darren Camas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of IPOR Labs. I'm here to talk to you today about IPOR, which is the interprotocol overblock rate, how we're bringing the fundamentals of a $450 trillion market to DeFi. So what is IPOR protocol? So I'm guessing you can get by the name. It's some sort of benchmark index rate. So one part is the IPOR index, which you can consider the cost of capital on-chain at the current block height. And then on the other side, we build IPOR interest rate swaps. So I'll get into the mechanics a little later, but let me just contextualize the importance of IPOR for the evolution and maturity of DeFi. And we'll look at it in comparison to some recent banking crises. So if we look at some failures of crypto-friendly banks inside of the US, we look at Silvergate, we look at Silicon Valley Bank, and we realize that it's actually not their exposure to crypto that put them in hot water. It was their exposure to supposedly very safe bonds. But if we simplify these collapses, they really boil down to improper risk management around two facets. One is interest rate risk, and the other is duration risk. So if we look at the IPOR index and the IPOR interest rate derivatives in terms of managing risk and also building term structure for DeFi, we can see the importance of these instruments for the evolution of the space. So first of all, in DeFi, we don't have duration risk because we don't have durations. And this is a problem. So in DeFi, you can take a debt instrument that is as short as one block, and this is a flash loan. So you can borrow collateral, you can do a couple of interactions, and then you can return the collateral within one block. So in the Ethereum sense, that's 12 seconds. So this is really, really interesting. It's innovative, but it's really useless if you're trying to get a home loan, for example. So the IPOR index, it's basically a spot index, right? Interprotocol overblock rate, it's calculated block, over block, over block. And this is fundamental for the maturation and creation of term structure in DeFi. So you can imagine that in the future, there will be the IPOR 1-month rates, the 3-month rates, the 6-month rates, and so on. And it's also critical in bootstrapping a yield curve in DeFi. On the other side, you have an interest rate swap, which obviously allows different institutions to manage interest rate risk. But because it's a smart contract, you can actually do something called a multi-call. And you can actually take different instruments to create a simple financial product. Okay, so what's the current state of the IPOR protocol? So as of today, we have around 32 million in TVL, which is total value locked. That's across USDC, USDT, and DAI. And that makes the IPOR the number 6 derivative protocol by TVL, and actually number 2 on Ethereum. Over the lifetime of the protocol, which is a little over 6 months, there's been over 3.68 billion in notional value traded, and it's getting one of the top stablecoin returns in DeFi. Okay, so let's look at the index. Right? The index, it's a benchmark rate, right? But we took a little bit of the best of traditional finance and the best of DeFi. And this is really what's going through the protocol throughout. So we look at something like structuring of the LIBOR, which is a survey of banking, a survey of different banks. So we chose this, and we chose protocols as a proxy for banks. So for example, Aave and Compound, the most dominant money markets, are the constituents to the rates in the IPOR index. If we think of a publication time, we think of the LIBOR as very geographic centric, right? 11 a.m. BST, or you have the overnight rates in the repo markets. But in DeFi, tell me what's overnight, right? They're running 24/7 around the globe. So this overblock construction gives us the closest proxy that we have to real time inside of DeFi. And then if we look at something like the BSBY, which is looking at all transaction volume across the Bloomberg terminal, well, DeFi is transparent by nature. You can actually construct a benchmark rate, and you can weight it on volume because all the transactions are going across blockchain network. So the IPOR index, here's the formula. You can find it on our website or in our quant library. But it's basically a mid-market rate. And the simple reason for that is because the interest rates, how they're structured on other DeFi credit markets, are giving you a lending rate and a borrowing rate. So it's not technically an offered rate, but it's sourced block over block. So what's the value of an index, right? If we look at something like the LIBOR, it was formerly called the world's most important number. And that's because you use it to structure deals, you use it to structure debt, you use it to structure derivatives. And we're talking about hundreds of trillions of dollars worth. So instead of looking at a LIBOR rate that's quoted across a terminal, that's written on paper into a legal contract and then enforced, when we replace this with a transparent on-chain rate, we now get smart contract to smart contract calls. So you will see an external contract that's actually calling to this on-chain IPOR rate, and it's time over time. So what you get in blockchain is transparency and history. So you could have external contracts, external protocols that are issuing different credit deals that are just referencing this on-chain rate. And it's open, it's transparent, it's free to query, and it's a public good. So this is the value. The future value of the IPOR index will be what is the value, what is the volume and the velocity of deals and debt and derivatives that are referencing this on-chain transparent contract through smart contract to smart contract calls. Okay, if we look at the interest rate derivative, let's go back to the best of TradFi, the best of DeFi. So in the TradFi sense, you have two financial institutions that are exchanging their interest rate payments. In the DeFi sense, how do you bootstrap a market from zero? And the best way that we've found is that you actually have this peer-to-pool construction. So that's the construction in the IPOR protocol. So if we talk about that 32 million locked, those are primarily depositors in USDC, USDT, and DAI. So this capital is sitting there waiting to underwrite the swaps. So you have a passive who we can consider the market maker, who is providing capital, and they can get return on this capital. And then on the other side, you have the peer who is actually taking the instrument. So the structure, rather than having this fixed term structure, when you're bootstrapping a market and you're bootstrapping something that has a short-term attention span like DeFi, you have to start with something that's a little bit more liquid, a little bit more accessible. So there's a rolling, flexible, you can call it an RFQ type system. So for example, the current swaps, as soon as you take them, the swap clock starts and it matures 28 days later. And from the pricing, rather than an order book or a broker, which is either computationally expensive to replicate on-chain or extremely inefficient, we use an automated market maker, which is some of the thing that really kicked off the whole DeFi ecosystem. So what does this automated market maker look like? Well, the IPOR isn't magic. The interest rate derivatives aren't magic. They're actually based in financial math. So, when you're doing quant models, you can take anything computationally expensive and run it on your own computer. But when you put it on chain, you need to think about computational efficiency, because computational efficiency is cost. So we took traditional models like whole white for traditional interest rate volatility. We took jump diffusion, which is actually modeling for these interest rate jumps, and mean reversion. And we took Longstaff-Schwartz, which is pricing for optionality. And we turned it into a market making with two planes. So it has a great approximation to risk, while it's cheap enough to run on chain. So really the magic is blending the quant models with a function that's simple enough to run on chain cheaply to price risk. Okay, so what do you do if you have something that's really just about 3 years old? Well, you don't have any market data. So we don't have much market data. We don't have historical data. We don't have this forward rate curve. So what do we have to do? We have to be very creative. So we use something called the Hawks process, which is basically snipping out a piece of time in the very short-term history that we have, and you can extrapolate that over a long time period. So we do this to create different synthetic data sets, and then we run tests with the automated market maker to see how it performs over different market conditions. So this is really neat how the quant team is really doing different modeling that's based on traditional finance, but with the constraints of the data that we currently have on chain. Okay, so if we talk about transparency, a lot of people think about crypto as this dark forest where everyone is hackers. You have these shadowy supercoders running around. It is and it's not. It's really not true. If you talk about data transparency, transparency is it's a feature, right? This is one of the main features that you get. So if you look at this is actually a screener of the IPOR composition over time. So if we compare it with something like the LIBOR is marred by scandal, it's marred by collusion, it's marred by corruption, and that's what led to its discontinuation, right? So what happens if you get this transparent on-chain rate, and these graphs are sourced just from taking data on-chain? So imagine what other kinds of things that you can do. So for example, if you're interested in leveraging the IPOR, stop by our booth later. We're looking for anyone who's a data provider, anyone who is a fund looking to essentially benchmark, what's the risk-free rate in DeFi, and for example, you can benchmark risk-adjusted returns inside of different DeFi strategies, for example. You can come talk to us after. On the other side, if we look at the bank failures, look at what you can do from an asset liability management perspective. So this is a screener that will launch within the next 2 weeks. And it's a simple graphic. It says, where's the money? So all this capital is being held from the depositor. It's also going out to yield from the money markets. And again, transparency is the transparency is the norm in DeFi. Right? So we can create this beautiful graphic that just tells you where's the money. So if you look at something like the IPOR, either the interest rate swaps or the pool or different DeFi fund structures, it actually makes a great structure programmatically for something like NAV calculation on-chain block over block. So again, if you're interested in talking about this, we're looking for different partners on the fund structuring side. And you can meet us outside. Okay, so what's the future of the IPOR protocol? So you can think of the IPOR protocol as the base layer, in the DeFi credit markets. So at the very bottom, you have this transparency layer in terms of the data and the different IPOR indices. And then you have the stabilizing layer, which are the different derivatives. So if you take a primary position and you can hedge it with interest rate derivative, that's being based on the IPOR rates, you get a simple, fixed rate product. But you can actually string these together in multi-calls to create more complex structures or structured products. So what's the future of the IPOR protocol? Well, let's talk about 5 to 10 years from now, when we're actually able to get this term structure. We're actually able to take something like a car loan or a home loan from a decentralized bank. There's a good chance that if IPOR is successful in its mission, that this loan will be based on the IPOR on-chain index, that it will be hedged with an interest rate derivative that's open, that's transparent, and finally, this whole experience will be invisible to the end consumer. So my name is Darren Camas again. I've been building in crypto for the last 12 years, started in 2011, some of the world's first exchanges. My co-founder was actually, he was an advisor to Anton, who was one of the co-founders of 1inch before they started 1inch. But it really wouldn't be possible with the rest of the talent that we have on team. So our quant team, it has 2 quants with over 22 years in fixed income each. Our chief scientist, he set up the trading desk at SBI Bits, the crypto wing of the large Japanese securities broker. Konstantinos is here with us. He is outside. He has 15 years as a trader in macro as well as interest rates. Our developers, they're coming from enterprise software development. So, we talked about security and scalability. These are native for the enterprise software developers. So for them to bring this discipline to DeFi is critical for this ecosystem to start growing. And then, of course, on the product side, you guys get to see some of the screeners and the visuals that we have. So how can we make this process seamless? How can we make a very nice user experience on top of this very complex infrastructure? So if we look at what's happening in the macro, we see that bank deposits are bleeding out and that the money market funds are taking advantage of this. And we see that actually there's a huge inversion in the DeFi rates, where the DeFi rates are going under the TradFi rates. But the question is, with all these collapses, what's going to happen now in the short and mid-term, right? Will we have this dovish policy incoming? Will we have this risk rally? Will we have this reinversion of rates between DeFi and TradFi? And then if we look at some things that have happened right now, if we look at regulatory perspectives, let's contrast what's happening in the US versus what's happening in the EU. Well, I imagine because of the crisis that USDC had because of their exposure to Silicon Valley Bank, you'll have renewed interest in algorithmic stablecoins. So I believe that we'll see a lot of algorithmic stablecoins on the rise, for better or worse. Some will do very well, some will probably collapse. You'll also see, I think, a rise of euro-backed stablecoins, and this is quite interesting. As Mikar has really put EU at the innovation center, moving away from the US. And if you have these different stablecoins, you could also have different strategies. So one, I think we'll see the rise of more FX solutions on chain. And then especially for the IPOR case, you get a lot of interesting cross-currency swap options. So right now, you can actually do cross-currency between USDC and USDT, for example. They have divergent behaviors, but you'll also be able to do it between US dollar stablecoins and Euro stablecoins. Circle just made an investment into some guys that are tokenizing the CNH, the offshore yuan. So you'll see all of these kind of really unique opportunities that I hope that will rise up. It'll make this ecosystem grow, and hopefully IPOR will be a strong part of this. So again, if you're interested in talking with us about either use of the IPOR index, the interest rate derivatives, or the fund structure, please come meet us outside. My name is Darren Camas. You can find all the documentation at IPOR.io. I think we're one of the few DeFi protocols with an entire quant library, so if you want to read up on the different models, all the information is on the page. Thank you very much.